Kind of where I got my start is the inspiration a lot is just stuff from my childhood. You know, I grew up watching a lot of TV and movies, and then that kind of melted in with things with hot rod, like a lot of young boys drawing hot rod cars, and so, you know, I got an interest very early on drawing hot rods, and Ed Roth and Rat Fink was something that I just did as a kid, you know, in the late 70s, early 80s. And so it kind of started with that, but then as I got older and more into a professional field, I ended up in animation, working for DreamWorks and Disney and feature film, animated films, that kind of thing, yeah. So I had been working in animation for about 20-something years. I started in '97 on the Prince of Egypt with DreamWorks, and then I worked through various films, The Road to El Dorado, and then eventually I made it to Disney feature animation, worked on films like The Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis, and Treasure Planet, Home on the Range. We were still doing hand-drawn animation, which I really liked, just drawing on pencil and paper and flipping pages. And so that lasted right up until Sinbad was DreamWorks' last hand-drawn film. Then at that point, we switched over to computer animation. And so in order to stay employed and keep working, I was able to switch over and learn the computer stuff. And so I worked on a couple of CG films like Shark Tale and Over the Hedge. But now that I had this new tool with the computer animation, that moved into things like computer video games. So I started doing game animation, God of War 2 and Gears of War and Uncharted and Spyro the Dragon. So I've been working professionally that way, but because we were doing CG now for so many years, I wasn't really drawing as much anymore, just pencil and paper. And so 2016, 2017, you know, I'd been working on a lot of films, a lot of games, and I was helping a friend of mine, Adrian Ropp, who's a terrific storyboard artist. He started doing Comic-Cons, comic book conventions, where he was drawing fan art of animation and things. And I went with him to a Comic-Con, and I was helping him we were doing a panel for the Disney Infinity video game. But with that, I was hanging around with his booth and seeing the drawings that he was doing. And I thought, boy, this is just a lot of fun. And so he talked me into getting my first booth at the next comic book convention. But with that, I had to have stuff to offer the fans. So I started drawing fan art stuff. And that kind of took off from there. And I just reignited this love of drawing again that I haven't done in a long time. So I just started drawing a lot, and the comic book stuff started getting bigger, where I was booking shows around the country. And so it became so big that we finally got to the point where it's like, you know what, let's just do this for a while. And so I literally resigned. I quit my job from Warner Brothers. I was doing a video game, and just started doing full-time illustration, just drawing, doing comic book conventions. Well, now that I had all this free time to draw, I started going back into stuff that I did as a kid. One of those was Rat Fink and hot rods. So I started messing around with those. I thought, I haven't drawn this in a while. And so with that, I got in touch with Eileen Roth and the Rat Fink estate, and they signed me on as a Rat Fink artist. And then that just exploded with the hot rod stuff. And because of my animation background and my love for pop culture and movies and TV shows, I started blending in all that as Rat Fink style hot rod stuff that had caricatures. Because of my animation background, I was able to do the caricature stuff. And so I started doing that kind of thing. And so it's all just these different worlds colliding, you know. Again, it's just more of my interests that all kind of melted together. So I had this love of hot rods and monster art from Rat Fink. I had this animation background that I was able to learn this foundation of characters and cartoons, and what that means with cartoons as far as attitude and expression, and so that was all my animation background. But I also had this great love of music. I've had a strong upbringing of Beatles and heavy metal, and I grew up in Southern California in the 80s hair metal era, so I grew up with bands, Guns N' Roses and you name it, Led Zeppelin and all that stuff. So I had all this love of rock and roll. So I was blending that stuff together. I'm a big fan of the Foo Fighters, and so I was doing Foo Fighters as Ed Roth, Ratfink style rock monster stuff. And with that, because of social media, I'm posting this stuff online. And so I ended up getting contacted by the actual Foo Fighters, which was just mind-blowing that they actually noticed my stuff. And so that opened the door where they asked if I wanted to do some stuff for them. So I ended up working with the Foo Fighters. They did a festival in 2018 called Cal Jam, and I got to work with them and got invited to the show and hang out. And so with that, opened the door to a lot of other music stuff because of these musicians all kind of know each other. And so that led in stuff with Taylor Hawkins and Chevy Metal and Brent Woods, who works with Sebastian Bach. And so there was just all these other doors that opened because of that. And so it's just been such a huge roller coaster thrill ride of, I don't know where it's going to go from one day to the next. Well, that was the thing that, the appeal to me for just the rock stuff and the outsider. Ratfink always had that appeal as when I was a kid of just being this underground kind of homemade, people were just doing this. It was non-corporate kind of thing. And so it just kind of had that rebellious kind of vibe to it. And so I think that kind of lends itself hand in hand with rock and roll and with monsters and so it kind of, that was to me the appeal, and I think that is the appeal to other younger artists that like kind of that feel, it's a little rebellious and it's kind of cool that way. And so, I think a lot of the younger kids like that stuff. Plus I try to blend a lot of my art with some of the more current things. I did some John Wick kind of Ratfink style stuff that some of the younger audience like and that kind of thing. And so I get a lot of suggestions for those, for some of the other stuff that I may not even be as familiar with, but that still kind of has that same cool feel to it. Hit me up if, you can find me a lot on social media. If you just look up Art of Thomas Estrada, you can find me anywhere, and hit me up with questions if you want to talk. Like, that was one thing for me as a young artist when I was coming up, being able to find those contacts of professionals that were already doing it, that I was just so grateful to, that took the time to talk to me about doing stuff and how to do things, and my wife's cousin Larry Flores was one that really helped me a lot to get into animation, and he took the time, and I was so grateful for that. I was talking about just recently with a friend right now about Bob Camp, was one of the creators of Ren and Stimpy, and he was one that I talked to when I first started doing Comic-Cons, and he was helping me with getting into shows and that kind of thing. And so I like to talk to other artists or aspiring artists that are looking just to get that kind of inside information, like how do you do it, because I don't have any college education. I'm not formally trained. I literally got in with just what I knew how to do, but it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for so many people that took the time and talked to me and shared with me, well, this is what they're actually looking for. That saved me a lot of time. And so I'm always eager to talk to anybody who has asked the